All right. Welcome, Russell. So glad we got to connect and have this time. Do you want to introduce yourself and just kind of tell us a little bit about your background and your history?
Sure. My name is Russell Hanson. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Sama Therapeutics. I work in AI neuropsychiatry, which is this interesting overlap of AI and mental health and drug development and neurology, and sort of how large language models and ChatGPT work together with healthcare is a really interesting evolving space right now. People want more better healthcare services, but with less cost. And how whether you want like an AI nurse telling you when your next meal is, or whether you need to be turned on your hospital bed, or whether you would trust an AI doctor to read your MRI or not. It's just kind of a lot of interesting questions right now with like AI and healthcare and society and people looking to get treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet trust is that common theme that you're constantly challenging. People might not even trust their doctors, so introducing that tech is definitely interesting. And you've had a pretty diverse background, it looks like, from all of these kind of innovation threads. What's the common kind of pulling together, whether it's something that's passionately driving you, whether it's tech that's driving you? How do you kind of interweave that?
Yeah, that's a interesting question. I guess personally, I'm come from a technology background, and so for me, I worked at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the Danish Technical Institute, the Georgia Institute of Technology, the Technical University of Berlin, and so for me, innovation is technology, and that's I guess what people hire me to work on and what I do. For us, in particular, saving time and money, getting the same level of care using AI or using computer programs or using stuff, whatever it is how I've approached innovation. We have like a real-time video avatar system that talks to people, and it kind of looks like you and I. Like honestly, we have somebody who looks similar to yourself who will do like a depression assessment or an anxiety assessment or like a health check-in. And a person can kind of look and talk to somebody who's listening and has super smart AI answers that sometimes are better than human answers because the doctor is busy. They have 20 patients that morning, and they're just it's hard to take time to give people attention and care.
No, that's great. I'm curious with that work that you're doing and, in your opinion, what separates those innovation advances that you're working on? What separates the ones that get stuck in R&D versus the ones that are really shipping and scaling, like the example that you just talked about?
Well, any company, any business, any organization is sort of beholden to their customers. If nobody's using it, nobody cares. If nobody's paying for it, it doesn't, it gets shelved or, something else. Whatever's making money gets the attention. And so, the customer's always right, and we build stuff that our customers want. And, that's just real important.
Yeah. And how do you challenge that when you're building out your teams that are working on this, especially in the healthcare space with things around, not compromising the execution with complexity, compliance in your space, safety? How are you trying to balance that and move forward without getting stuck in that bog?
Yeah, I just got off like an hour and a half long talk with a bunch of like healthcare executives, and we were talking about the same thing. In
Hmm.
a large company, it's really kind of there's like regulatory folks within that company who take care of whether you're FDA compliant or whether your data governance is compliant with whatever is going on. At smaller companies, we were talking about signing a BAA agreement with OpenAI or Anthropic. So, if you want HIPAA compliance for your product, signing a BAA is often sufficient. If you're at a, multinational pharmaceutical company like Pfizer or Merck, there's 15 layers of administration you have to straddle or
Hmm.
to get approval to use ChatGPT 5 for your work project. Yeah, so it depends.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, I'm curious from your perspective, somebody in this space and within the healthcare AI space and that kind of convergence there, what's the piece of advice you'd give somebody? Is it stay away, or is it how would you advise them to navigate that world?
Yeah, honestly, that's a real good question. Personally, I think that there's a lot of better business opportunities in AI than healthcare and medicine. I don't know. Sometimes I think one thing and sometimes I think the other. But I think that, the regulatory environment for AI right now is super complicated, and it's a struggle for small companies and big companies to get their customers to believe that they're safe and the thing isn't going to hallucinate. And there's lots of, as we speak, there's kind of a regulatory crackdown on using large language models for therapy in particular. Using AI chatbots for therapy alone without a person in the loop was outlawed in the state of Illinois. Therapy, counseling, advice is, one of the number one uses of these large language models. People, that's just what they end up using them for. And we kind of make a distinction between subclinical and clinical cases. So as a clinical use case would be, you need to see the doctor, this is disrupting your life, kind of like, you broke your leg, you can't walk, you need to see the
Hmm.
doctor. There are a lot of similar analogies for behavioral health and mental health. But yeah, in non-regulated industries, I think it's more sort of a Wild West environment where people are just looking to grow their businesses.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating because I feel like when people are building an AI tool, when it's something a little bit more straightforward, you kind of make sure there's no dead ends or when you need to escalate a cause. And for the stuff that you guys are working on, you're not only having to figure out no dead ends, what's your escalation process, but you're also acting as a confidant for the end user. So it's really interesting when you're kind of dealing with that kind of topic. And again, I probably use my ChatGPT on my phone constantly as a friend and as an advisor. And you guys are doing it in a more of a formal perspective. So that's really fascinating. And I'm curious from your standpoint, you're kind of seeing all of the different ways that AI is being used within business. What's the biggest misconception on the hype cycle? So, something that just sounds like when you start hearing people talk about it, it's just fingers on a chalkboard. Is it, vibe coding? Obviously, you guys are doing a little bit of the synthetic persona models. What's the thing that just like gets under your skin and you're like, hey, it's misdirected, get off that talk track? What's the negative there?
Yeah, well, you mentioned vibe coding and synthetic
Mm-hmm.
personas. I think those two are amazing. So we sometimes call synthetic personas digital twins in like
Mm-hmm.
the healthcare space or pharma space. So digital twins have kind of gone through different layers of development, and I think
Mm-hmm.
frankly the current crop of large language model digital twins are far superior to the previous ones, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that's definitely a positive for digital twins or synthetic personas or avatars or whatnot. I think likewise for coding, it's saves me a ton of time. It's kind of
Yep.
it's kind of the to the point where, I would have a PhD scientist from Yale doing the same thing as I have like Claude doing on a day-to-day basis, or I'm able
Mm-hmm.
to put together transform a data file for my professor colleague at the University of Pennsylvania in 20 seconds, where it would have taken me half a day to transform a data file. So I just think it saves folks a lot of time. I don't have any. I think that, of course there's, I don't know, people who aren't skilled in the art of vibe coding, you're probably going to have to learn how to program something or other. But I think for people who do know how to program, it's just a tool that
It's an
saves.
amplifier. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you've talked a lot about translational innovation before, where novel ideas have to basically take the leap from lab to real world. What's that one insight you've learned about crossing that gap? And what do people get wrong about that assumption?
The case that I've seen a lot of is like a student in graduate school wants to, has an idea, they fall in love with a project, and they want to make a company out of it. They've heard about Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and, venture capital, and, they want to get rich or, die trying or whatever. I don't know. I think, particularly people in their 20s are, they want to take risks. And so for them, like starting a company is just another risk they want to take.
Mm,
But I think unfortunately a lot of people who are, what I've seen kind of coming from universities is they don't, that they come from like an engineering background or a science background, and they don't have a business background. And unfortunately, there's a lot of hurdles kind of on the legal side and on the business side and on the tax side and on the company formation side and on the capital raising side that are entire jobs. And so I think that, coming straight out of school with a genetics PhD or a biomedical engineering degree and trying to learn business is a tough road, and I think that people learn that eventually. I think you kind of need an MBA to talk to the other MBAs, as we sometimes say. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm not sure if that's my piece of advice, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah, and it's tough to balance the need the MBA to talk to the other MBAs, and then also just that unfiltered passion that comes from being in your young 20s and, having that eagerness to learn. I definitely think that those 2 combined can get people a level up. All right, I'm gonna transition a little bit to talk about hackathons. So hackathons are obviously a big driver and can build momentum within your business. But in complex spaces like the ones that you're in, I feel like it can be hard to translate that momentum into sustained innovation. So I'm just curious from your perspective, is there a strategy or a processy or, people at the table that really help ensure that those ideas move forward after a hackathon or after a sprint ends?
Yeah, definitely. That's a really interesting question. I had a conversation with a gentleman recently whose hackathon was sponsored by a leading cryptocurrency exchange, and
Hmm.
right after his hackathon, we went on ChatGPT and we were like, I don't want to name, these exact groups or companies
Hmm.
for confidentiality, but we went on ChatGPT and we were like, who's the leader? XYZ, which was this gentleman's like company in space. And, the first thing that came up was the name of his company on ChatGPT and, that he had a hackathon with this cryptocurrency exchange. So, just the press value
Hmm.
and I don't know, just having an event and getting a sponsor for it and, getting interested people together to work with you on, whatever it is you're working on. I think, for him it was super valuable and it, almost invaluable that level of press and exposure. So yeah, that's what I saw recently.
Yeah. And I'm curious from your perspective, that's more of that external, you said like the media, the recognition, the awareness that it's going on. Have you seen those processes work internal on a smaller scale? So where you just need a department to kind of spike and hyper focus on an initiative. Have you seen success in that regard?
Yeah, I almost wish that we had more hackathons within our company and within, groups I've had recently. It's kind of I don't know. In Boston, for me anyway, we used to have a lot of hackathons like in rooms at MIT or something in particular. Or, Microsoft would host hackathons, a couple doors down from MIT in Cambridge and Boston. But yeah, I think, getting people together, buying some pizzas or beers and somehow, I don't know, maybe, for folks with kids and families and stuff, I don't think, staying at work late at night is all that appealing. But you could have a daytime hackathon or an offsite hackathon or something that's a little bit more interesting than just going to your office and saying today we're going to have a hackathon. I think a little bit of diversity or just do something different would makes the hackathon more fun and interesting.
Yeah, for sure. The camaraderie as well as, yeah, getting out of your day to day, out of the 9 to 5 and refocusing on something that can drive some energy. And I'm curious, so it sounds like you participated in a hackathon then, as well as led them?
I mean I've done more hackathons than I care to name.
Yeah. What's the big kind of takeaway for you as a person, like from a personal standpoint of why you get energized from them or why you like leading them?
It's just like a opportunity to do something that's a little bit outside of your day to day, and like
Mhm.
I think people who go to hackathons want to build something, and it's more fun to be in an environment where there's like 50, 60 more people doing something fun and interesting, and sometimes people make little teams, so 2 to 3 people are like, hey, do you want to do this, and they divide
Mhm.
the project. And sometimes the prizes are pretty cool, and you honestly, I think we did a hackathon for like swimming in data, where we had like a Microsoft Connect, and we wanted to swim around some data set, and I forget who the sponsor was, but we won an iPad at the end of the day, and four people had to split one iPad, and that was a little bit complicated, but
Check it out, like a library card. Yeah. No, I think that's what's fascinating about hackathons is you have the individual gets so energized, they get to meet people across the business, they get to work on something that they typically wouldn't work on. And then at the end of the day, the sponsor or the person that's, executing it and leading it is getting their entire employee base to work on a specific problem that needs to be solved. So yeah, it's got benefits on both sides of the coin. Yeah. All right. And to wrap it up, kind of looking back at your own journey, what's a mistake or wrong assumption that you made early on in innovation that you think if you could rewind the tape and do it again, what would you do differently?
sure. I think one issue we had where I feel like we could have done better on is we outsourced too much stuff, and I done less outsourcing and kind of somehow brought more people in or brought better people in instead of like relying on outsourced work. I think that would have been better. It's like
Yeah.
if you pay an outside group to build your product, like on the one side, like if they could build the product, they already would have, and you're basically paying to train them to solve your problem, and then you like lose the expertise of having your own person trained to solve your problem. So those are
Hmm.
two big problems with doing too much outsourcing.
Yeah, I feel like that's constantly, especially in today's world where the cost of talent is extremely high, something that's constantly in debate for people if they need to outsource or bring it in. And I think what you just said with losing the knowledge potentially and keeping that internal is a huge benefit of that. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
ultimately it caused that project to fail. It was just too much outsourced stuff and just didn't work.
That's fascinating. Yeah. All right. Well, what's new? What's coming up on the horizon that you're excited about? Anything that we should expect to see from you guys and from your team?
I can't talk about,
I love it.
stuff in public, but we have some papers coming out. We have a product release as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, we have a study coming out on AI agent patients and AI agent psychiatrists and how to use those as digital twins or synthetic personas.
That's great. Yeah, I'm excited to read that. I come from the healthcare world, so definitely invested in kind of how you guys are balancing all of that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Russell. It was great chatting with you. Great hearing about your background, about the innovation spikes that you've been doing, and what's coming down the bend for you. So appreciate the time.
Nice to chat.